Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. I know that this webinar was moved a couple of times. I think you're all aware of the weather out in Texas, and it had an impact on Mikey. So we appreciate your flexibility, and thank you for being on. I'll quickly go over the housekeeping most of you are familiar with. It's a webinar format. Your cameras are off and everyone's on mute. Okay, this has been recorded. So we'll make a recording available for you guys later. Please use the Q&A tab for questions instead of the chat. Benjamin will go through the questions and either ask them at the right moment if it appears during the presentation, and certainly not if not at the end. Like I say, we are recording it, and you are welcome to go back and watch it. I'm going to have Benjamin give Mikey a sort of more formal introduction. I just personally want to thank Mikey. As always, we're very lucky and blessed to have so many people that are willing to help us. We're not at the closing yet, so I need to take that one off. We're so lucky to have so many people helping us, and Mike, of course, is a professional and someone who's spent many years in NorCal, was very was very forthcoming and happy to help. So a big thank you from everyone. But Benjamin, I'm going to turn it over to you for a more formal introduction.
Great, thank you. Would like to thank Mikey for doing this. A little bit about him. He's a Northern California boy. Parents, at least one parent's Chilean, correct?
Yep.
I had, I don't know how long ago, showed up to a PDP session in region 3 and 4 and saw Mikey coach for the first time. And I knew that here was somebody that had a gift. His connection to the players, his understanding of the intensity, and the training itself was an indication. It doesn't surprise me where he's at right now. Talking to him prior to this, in the last half an hour, we've been chatting. He talked about the first time he went to Argentina and he saw Koki Rafa coach, and he understood the necessary intensity for a training. And we talked about those sort of epiphanies and those moments of when you go and see the highest level and you realize what's necessary. He also talked about the details and the attention to detail and the total commitment that he made as a director at that time. He later became the director of Boca Juniors. So if you see Mikey coach, you see similar things. Total intensity and appropriate intensity inside a learning environment. Some of his background, interestingly enough, he's a yoga instructor. And so he stayed with me when he came to Sac Republic. And I remember walking out one morning and he was sitting there in a tree pose and held it for like 17 minutes as I made coffee and did the dishes around him. And it was remarkable. No, not quite, but he has an A license. He's traveled the world studying football, which I think is the next step after getting your licensing. Played at University of San Francisco. He's a Don. He coached and we brought him to Sac Republic as he was a lead phase director of the 15s and below. And then he also worked with U.S. national teams. And when he worked in the national teams, he met the head coach of FC Dallas, Lucci, who is, when he got the job, he said, hey, come up with me. They had already hired him away from Sac Republic to go on the MLS and the youth, and then he went up with him to the first team. So without further ado, last thing, he was wearing a cowboy hat, and we said, okay, Mikey, that's a little much. So he switched to this hat. So he's not really an Oakland fan. That's all he could find.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Does that work?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, this is my first time doing a webinar. I can't see everybody's faces, but just want to start by thanking everybody for coming on and having a listen. Again, this is a huge honor for me, and I really appreciate everybody taking the time. I appreciate the invitation. I'm always happy and willing to discuss football development, everything that revolves around it. And frankly, I'm really humbled and honored that anybody would want to hear what I got to say. So without further ado, I'm going to start the presentation just with setting an intention. This is something I picked up in yoga, actually. But I want to set the intention of just having an open mind. I learned from Franz Hoek this phrase that I love so much, that it's not the way, it's a way. Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about today is not dogma. I'm not the all knower of everything curriculum. This is my interpretation of how to develop a curriculum, and it has to do a lot with my educational background, my experience coaching, and also just my tastes. At the end of the day, there are many roads to the same destination, and I believe in a nonlinear world, and that's really important for me. So to outline the presentation, just so everybody kind of knows what kind of journey they're going to go on, I'll start by introducing myself. And then I want to talk about pre-curriculum. So it's a program planning part 1. The third part will be curriculum design. I'll give some examples of my own. Finish with some post-curriculum, which is program planning part 2. And then I'll have some recommendations for leadership in clubs, and we'll finish with some question and answers. So just a visual of who I am. As Benjamin already introduced me very well, I grew up in the Bay. I'm very proud to be from the Bay Area, part of NorCal. I'll always be grateful to the experiences that I had there, the coaches that I met, the education. Every experience I had. The school I did, I went to University of San Francisco. I got a master's degree at Fresno Pacific University. I did my yoga certification course through the College of San Mateo, actually, which was awesome because they put a more educational emphasis on it, including a lot of anatomy and stuff. And I'm currently getting organizational leadership master's through SNHU. And then coaching wise, I coached at Burlingame Soccer Club, De Anza Force, Sacramento Republic, moved on to FC Dallas, and of course, NorCal PDP in the Fiorentina project. So we'll start with the question of what is curriculum? Not quite yet, okay? So it's really important for me to express that curriculum is only one element of a much more complex system, okay? And in order for me to explain curriculum well, we need to know the system well. Because if you take curriculum and you isolate it just by itself, you're going to understand something that doesn't actually exist when all the pieces are interacting together. So the complex system, what I'll refer to as the program, entail a ton of different elements, including curriculum, that all interact with each other, function with each other in a way that the program emerges. So a couple questions here in terms of program planning. Why do we plan? Okay, so the professor is one of my idols, the former Fiorentina director, and I would go to every single one of his courses through NorCal because he was just so much smarter than me. But I liked his definition of why do we plan. He said to ensure progressions and direction of goals. That's 1. 2, to ensure the optimization of time in the program. And 3, to control and assess the program, measuring player performance. So basically, this is to make sure that we have a direction that we're going in and we know how to progress, to make sure that we're not wasting time, that we're efficient with our time, and to be able to assess whether or not the goals that we are directed towards are actually being achieved. It's always important to know that we plan for intended learning, okay? So planning helps us ensure that we're taking meaningful steps towards putting a planning plan in place. Definition of a program for me, so that we know, is the program encompasses everything a child, parent, and or coach will experience at the club. This is important just so that you can take reference to when we start talking about curriculum and the other elements that that combine to create the program, that you know that it's a huge holistical thing. It's not just what the player experiences. It's also important to know it's what everybody involved with the program will experience. Therefore, it's important that careful, thoughtful, and purposeful planning is taking place at every single level, okay? That goes from the club leadership all the way down to the coach. And we need to think about the player's experience, the parent's experience, and the coach's experiences at every single step along the way. So what does a successful youth program, football program require? I'm going to go through these a little bit more in detail, but the first thing for me is a community and player pool analysis. Okay, we need to know the needs, values, and motivations of the players that we have, the community that we represent. The next thing that a program needs is a clear mission, vision, core values, and goals. Okay, these are the things that are going to direction behavior. The third thing that I recommend a program having is a clear game model, having player profiles clear, and having scouting and recruiting strategies clear. The fourth element is curriculum, which we're going to talk about today in a lot more detail. After that, we need to have effective teaching and learning principles. So we need to know how we're going to deliver the learning in terms of behaviors from teacher to student and student to teacher. Next, we need to have a purposeful methodology. The methodology is going to be the how the learning is going to take place, what kind of exercises we will use, and how we structure those, how we structure the learning. Next, periodization is important. So now we need to decide when the learning is going to take place and how much of the learning will take place at certain points. I put this one in bold because I think it's the most important. You need to execute the program. You need to actually do work, and you need to actually implement whatever you have planned. Lastly, you have program evaluation processes. And then finally, you have adjustments based on this continuous analysis. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with some of these, but I wanted to give you an overall framework of how I see a youth program, youth football program being developed into a complex system. Crucial for it to be an organic and holistic program is that alignment, integration, and interdependence of all elements. Meaning, none of these things can function in isolation. Okay, for the program to make sense, everything should be aligned. So the curriculum should match the teaching behaviors, while also always matching the mission, vision, and values. The mission, vision, core values should be in alignment with the game model, which should be in alignment with how we evaluate ourselves at the end. This is fundamental in my opinion. So now we'll go into curriculum, okay, development. So what is curriculum? Okay, based on Kelly and Melgrano, their definition is is a plan or set of outcomes for learning, okay? The important thing for this is basically all curriculum is in the way that I view it. It's what I want the player to learn, okay? It's a plan or set of outcomes that a player will be able to learn by the end of a X amount of time with me. How does curriculum differ from instruction? This is important because a lot of people think, okay, curriculum is everything. I look at curriculum as a very specific part. It's more the learning outcomes. Instruction is how am I going to deliver those learning outcomes? So it's important to know that we need to distinguish between the plans that are made in regards to the learning and the learning that actually takes place. Okay, again, based on the Fiorentina, the professor from Fiorentina, he always says you plan for an ideal program, okay, and then there's the reality of the program. And the difference between the two of them is going to be the theoretic and then the instruction, what actually takes place. Therefore, for me, we'll define curriculum in having three phases. One, what are the students going to learn? Okay. Two, how are the students going to acquire that learning? That's going to be the more of the instruction piece for me. And then three, how is the student learning going to be verified? And that will be the evaluation process, which is the end. It's important to know that even though curriculum is a set outcome based on my definition, you could have a different definition, and instruction is the delivery of those learning outcomes, that these two things are at the same time distinguishable elements, but at the same time, they're inseparable. You can't have learning outcomes without good instruction. You can't have instruction without learning outcomes. Lucci wants to say hi, guys. So he says hi. What's up to you guys?
I got one quote for them.
Okay, hold on here.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for sharing,
Everyone's on
Mikey.
mute. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for sharing him with us. We want him back eventually.
Hey, guys, I'll be. Yeah, no, I'm going to let you have them, but just want to share this. So every time we lose, it's my fault. But every time we win, it's all Mikey. You guys to know that. All right? Crack. Good to see you guys.
Likewise. Make sure you let him know we want you back in Northern California, not right now.
Well, I will. But that at the end of the day, these two things are inseparable. You need to know that they go hand in hand. They're two sides of the same coin. It's really important, again, that I say that all of this should be aligned with the mission, vision, and values of the club from the beginning. Those need to be the foundation. And from that foundation, you start to be able to go into more and more detail. Okay, so I was talking about curriculum development a little bit more specifically. I'm a big fan of backward design and instructional alignment in terms of curriculum development. What does that mean? Backward design basically means is that we start with big picture, and then we start to narrow down in terms of details. So where when I started, for example, coaching, I started with the training session. And in fact, I started with the exercise. Okay, what exercises do I want to use? And the more and more I learned, the more and more I realized I needed to take a big picture approach first, and then I could whittle down and get to the final details of the learning. But in order to have a purposeful direction, I got to start at the end first. Okay, putting backward design into practice by starting with the following questions. Okay, what do I want my players to know or be able to do at the end of my program or my year, based on participating? How will we know that the learning actually took place? And then how can I get them from point A to point B in the most challenging and interesting way possible? Okay, this is really important for me because now I'm thinking from a more global perspective, and I'm not just thinking from the day to day. I'm thinking I have a beginning a season, I'm beginning an age group, and I have these players. I've done an analysis, I know where they are. Okay, where do I want to take them over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 6 months, whatever that is, and then I go from there. Instructional alignment is something that we've already kind of talked about in terms of alignment. It's important that everything is aligned, as I've said, but equally as important, it's important that it's aligned with your players' needs, values, and motivations and skill level. So you need to know your players really, really well if you're going to do a good job in terms of developing a curriculum for them. We talk about a little bit more of a long-term approach when we talk about curriculum. We don't talk about what we're going to teach tomorrow. We kind of talk about what learning we want to take place over a longer period of time. So where do we start? Absolutely. We start at the finish. We start at the end, and we move on from there. So step one in terms of curriculum development. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the whole program, but I'll be very specific when it comes to the curriculum piece. I'm going to go through the whole program. Why? Because I don't think it's valuable for anybody to understand how to build a curriculum in the way that I see it if they don't know how it interacts with the whole program as a whole. So step one is we conduct the player and community pool analysis. Okay. At the same time, we develop a club mission, vision, values, and style of play. So what kind of club am I at? What community do we live in? Is it a tech savvy community? Is it a blue collar community? Is it a farming community? These things are really important. I have my player pool. Do I have a rec level player pool? Am I at an elite academy level? Do we have a talent base that is like we do here in Texas, in Dallas, where we can have international players just from our own neighborhoods coming out on a yearly basis? Or am I in an area where it's not talent dense? And I need to know that. In terms of defining a club mission, vision, and values, I cannot understate how important this is. In everything I do, any program I create, any project I take on, I always take these 3 steps. Okay, I have my own personal values, but I have values also depending on what kind of project I want to go on, because the community and player pool analysis has to take it into account. But basically the mission is, what do we want to do? What do we want to achieve? Okay, where are we going? The vision is, okay, what are we going to look like in the future? Okay, what are we going to grow into? And then our values are, what are the core identity, habits, feelings that we have about things that need to be seen throughout the entire organization. Okay, not just words on a piece of paper. That means nothing. Words on a piece of paper that when you look at a club and you see the behaviors, you say, ooh, I understand that. Whether it's diversity or whether it's respect, or it does not matter, in my opinion, what your core values are. It's that you have them clearly identified and that they can be seen in terms of behaviors. And then style of play, the game model. You need to ensure that you know how you want the game to be played in order for you to develop that curriculum. If you don't know how the team is going to play, then it's a little bit more difficult to create a very, very comprehensive football curriculum. You can develop a physical education curriculum, but it would be hard to implement a football specific curriculum. I put this graphic up here just because when you say game model, everybody has different views of it, but at least I can show you a little bit the way that I have organized my own game model. So my game model has different layers. I'm thinking about a way that I can visualize this so it doesn't look so much like a hierarchy, because it's not a hierarchy, more than it is different levels and of importance, but at the same time, they're all interrelated. So I always start with the fundamental, the first block here, which I call priorities of play and fundamentals. Okay, these are much more general principles. Fundamental priorities of play, for example, are if I have the choice to play inside and I have the choice to play outside, I like to play outside, or I like to play inside. If I have the option to play a pass on the ground or to play a pass in the air, I'd rather have the pass on the ground. If you have a few set of very clear priorities of play in terms of without the ball and with the ball, your teams will already start to develop some sort of style. Fundamentals, in my opinion, are football actions that are true regardless of what position you play, what part of the field you're in, what what phase of the game you're in. The only thing that matters in fundamentals is whether you're in ball recovery or you're in possession. So these are things like body orientation. The center back needs to have good body orientation the same way that a winger needs to know good body orientation. And the center back, whether he's in the back third in a build-up or he's in the final third receiving a pass back, he needs to understand body orientation. Fundamentals are really important for me because, in my opinion, these are even true if you're not playing an organized game. If you're playing 5v5 or 3v3 or 2v2 out on the street, the fundamentals are true. These are just actions that footballers need to be able to do. These are the building blocks, in my opinion, at all levels. The difference is at the youth level, I think that we need to make a huge effort to ensure that these fundamentals are developed within the players. And at the professional level, we are more looking at how we can maximize and optimize the fundamentals that the players already have, and look for maybe one or two little tweaks that they might not have, or that they can make even better to help potentialize their game. The next layer that I have is main principles of play. So now we talk about more of a collective. They're kind of like collective principles, but that are still not too specific. So now, instead of just relying on whether you have the ball or not, principles of play from the collective standpoint will also take into account what moment of the game you are in terms of I have possession, and am I in a build-up moment or am I in a scoring moment? Everybody has different phases. I learned from the beginning with Franz Hoek. Early on in my career, it was the 4 phases. It was build-up, possession, generate attack, and scoring. At this point, I personally just manage 2. I have build-up and I'm scoring. But that's not what's important. What's important is kind of seeing how you can layer the different principles in your own game model. The next layer would be area-specific principles. So these are just things that are a little bit more specific in terms of what part of the field you're in. An example of that would be when my team is in the final third, I might want my team to play in a little bit more narrow because I want them to start directioning things towards the goal. Whereas when I'm in my back third, I want the field as big as possible. The next layer is preferred positional interactions. This is where now the system of play starts coming into effect. So am I playing 4-3-3, 4-4-2 diamond, 3-5-2, 3-4-3? And what kind of positional movements and interactions between the players do I like? And I may not teach every single one of them to the players, don't get me wrong, but it's important for me as a coach to know so that I have a clear idea in my head. And when I see things emerge or not emerge, I can have a good influence on the team. And then my last stage of principle is what I call the preferred solution to game scenarios. These are now system also, but these are also very, very specific based on what the problems the opponent presents to me. An example for that would be build up against a high press that presses you in a 4-4-2 versus build up in a high press against an opponent that presses me in a 3-3, kind of like a Liverpool press. I want to make sure that I, as a coach, have it very clear in my head the way that I could see my teams coming out of those solutions. Okay, step 2. So we've now done pretty global stuff, right? We've analyzed the player pool and the community. We've created mission, vision, values, okay? And we've created a game model. We've created a way that we want to play. The next step for me is I need to define what type of player we need to develop in order to realize step 1. Okay, so now I'm talking a little bit more at the individual level. Okay, I have these players, and what kind of players do I need for step 1 to be true? So I need to make sure that I'm teaching them things that are in line with our mission, vision, values, in line with the community analysis in terms of the strengths of the community, and in line with the game model. This is going to be important in terms of the game model, knowing what does each position, what qualities will each position need to be able to do to execute the game model that that we have. Again, for certain age groups, fundamentals is going to be the most important by far, especially, I mean, most of youth. But it's still a very interesting thing. We want to know from a player perspective what each position should be able to do, how this player should behave, because I believe in a total education of the player. We spend a lot of time with the players. And this will give us a description of not only how we're going to develop them, but what kind of players we're going to recruit, what kind of people we're going to recruit. It's important for me to state that depending on the club objectives and missions, a scouting and recruiting strategy falls aligned with this. And I don't know where everybody's at, so I didn't include it. But for example, step 2 here at FC Dallas, once we've defined what kind of players we need to develop, that also gives us a very, very clear indication of what kind of players we should be going out and looking for in terms of when we go out and scout in the Dallas area or even in the United States. Okay, step 3. Step 3 is now where you get into very specific curriculum development. Okay, the other 2 steps are other parts of the whole program that interact with curriculum, but now we go very specific into curriculum. So we break down age groups ranges and global objectives per age group. So my definition of the age group is age group range is a cluster of age groups together for the purposes of planning the learning. There's no scientific, you can have U6 through U8, you can have U6 through U10. How you get to your age group ranges will depend on your club, will depend on how many players you have, what kind of skill levels you have. An example for me is U7 through U11, okay? What is a global objective? So again, now we're whittling it down even more. Now we're starting to define what the players will learn. So the global objectives will define the global aim and emphasis for the development of a player during that entire age range. So from U7 to a U11, the global objectives are A, B, and C, okay? What would we like to achieve in terms of learning and teaching during that age range? And it clarifies what we intend players to learn, which then drives when and how we teach players during the specific age range. So this is now starting to give, this part of the curriculum is going to give coaches a target. They're going to have a longer term target there in terms of specific curriculum that they're going to develop. Step 4 is define domain, age group specific benchmarks and player learning outcomes. So now we've taken this global objective between a cluster of ages, go into specific age range benchmarks and learning outcomes. And we're going to define them per domain. Brief explanation of the domains. The domains are the typical, it has been, people say technical, physical, tactical, mental. I personally have broken them down for myself as psychomotor physical. Okay, so that's physical development, it's power, speed, it's fundamental motor skills, it's endurance, mobility. I define technical more as technical coordination. So I define that as the execution of technical skill in isolation away from the game reality. The third one for me is technical tactical. This is decision making and execution of skill in a sport situation. Okay, and then fourth for me is mental emotional. So these are mental life skills as well as emotional activation and control. Again, it's important to know that you're never using any one of these domains at once by themselves. So you should never really be teaching them all at or one at a time by themselves. What you're doing though is by defining these, we're giving ourselves as practitioners a little bit more of a clear structure that will help direction our behavior to help the player learn. Let me see if I got one more note here. Perfect. So the benchmarks are important. Benchmarks are different stages of learning or competence. Okay. And there are several, and there can be more or less. That is up to you when you are developing your curriculum. So the benchmark is basically what stage in the learning are we at any given moment. So we may want our U8 players to be at a basic stage of competence in beating a player at 1v1. This is when learning is basic, is maybe where learning is still is drastic. You see improvements really fast, and the movements are basic. They're not matured. Okay. While a U13 player, we may want them to be at a more advanced stage where learning isn't so marked. You don't see from one practice to the next in 1v1 a huge improvement, but what you do see is a more fluid movement. You see more, you see better coordination. You see more fluidity in terms of how they're combining different skills. So it's important to know the reason I think benchmarks or stages of learning are so important is because it provides a visual or context that learning never stops. Learning is continual. So even though at U8 and U8 through U11, you're focusing a lot on one-on-one maybe, okay, because we want the players to be good in one-on-one. It doesn't mean that at U17 they're still not getting better at one-on-one, and that they're not needing to get stimulus in those one-on-ones. It just means, in my opinion, that they're in a different stage of the learning. So instead of being at that basic stage, as I mentioned, where the learning is visually very visible and drastic, meaning in 2 weeks of doing 1v1, you go, wow, look how much they're improving. It's still important because they're hitting different stages. So I don't want anybody to get too caught up in with this concept because it's a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, in my opinion. And I'm going to give you an example of mine later, so you guys will have a visual of these 3 steps at the later point. But the point is just to make sure that you don't have a final outcome too early. You need to make sure that there's progress, and that you know that even though a player is focusing more on this in this age range, that learning is still going to be taking place for them over there. Another thing I want to mention is that this does not mean that a player needs to get to a certain stage before they're allowed to learn other things. That is not the intended message. So for example, people might take the stages. No, I want the player in 1v1 to get from basic to average before I move on to 2v1. And I think this is a huge mistake. I think that the ability to learn 2v1 and 3v2 is going to help in the 1v1. And taking a less linear approach to the development is very, very important. Sorry. Okay, so the last part here is the player learning outcome. Okay, this delineates what each player should be able to do within each of the 4 domains. So we talked about psychomotor, physical, technical coordination, technical, tactical, mental, emotional, upon graduating each age group. Okay. Here, I'll give you just a brief example. So a brief example for a U12 in terms of technical coordination is they might need to reach the average stage for ball manipulation. Okay. The same U12 might need to also reach the average stage or the basic stage of being able to dominate a variety of 1v1 situations. Okay. From a mental emotional perspective, it might be that they need to reach the average stage for the ability to demonstrate a growth mindset, or produce proper effort. Okay. What we're doing now is basically we're using the stages of learning, and we're talking about something slightly more specific than the global outcome, but it's not that specific. I'm not saying the player needs to be able to do the Cruyff move in a 1v1 situation. I'm saying they need to be able to reach a proficient stage in a certain stage of learning of 1v1 situations. So now we start whittling it down and getting a little bit more detail. As a reminder, this has to be aligned with the vision, mission, value, style of play. And it's got to be, you got to have each domain pretty clear in terms of what you want to learn. Making outcomes authentic and specific is a really, really important concept, okay? The way that we make them authentic is we make sure that they are evaluated in realistic settings, okay? So when we want to see if learning takes place, although I think some tests can be good in terms of technical tests, the real test is, do they have success in the game or not? Okay. We all know that whether they have success in the game or not depends on a lot more than just their skill level, whether they're late bloomers, early bloomers. That's where it takes a little bit of the right eye to know, is the player having success, and why is the player having success? Is the player not having success? Why is the player not having success? If the player is not having success because of physical reasons, or they're having too much success, easy success because of physical dominance, then it's our responsibility to make adjustments to the evaluation performance process so that they can perform in an authentic situation, authentic game reality situation where they have the opportunity to be successful. Okay. The law of specificity is super important. Okay. If we decide to do an evaluation in a more of a training setting, make sure that the training exercise that I evaluate in is something that looks like football. It needs to look like football in order for the outcome to be authentic and specific. So I brought this, I put this up here because to demonstrate again the idea that none of these things are ever functioning by themselves in isolation. Okay, so in terms of domains, I view domains as a network of interacting elements. So we have the psychomotor, physical, the mental, emotional, the technical coordination, the technical time. They're always interacting with each other. And I thought it was important to put them much more because there's so much more. There's other things there that I didn't perfectly define. And I need to know that as a coach, that it's impossible for me to explain and define the ability of a player in a football setting with just 4 domains. Okay. So a couple of things to note here is, as I said, although these do exist, we don't believe a player is ever exclusively in one domain in isolation. So instead, the player is constantly utilizing the interaction of all 4 domains for behavior to emerge. Therefore, we should not be analyzed or trained in isolation. Okay, we're complex, and the domain is just an attempt for me to simplify the complexity of the human being. Okay, its purpose is only to allow me to help structure my curriculum. Okay, it's not for me to go out and work only psychomotor, only mental emotional, only technical coordination, only technical tactical. Okay, you may say, okay, well, Mikey, we know Fiorentina method, they would do psychomotor coordination. But when I see the Fiorentina method with the professor, I think there's a big misunderstanding from a lot of people, because they are still able to combine a lot of the elements. And even though they do find times to isolate in certain circumstances, they're never still fully isolated into one. Step 5, we go even closer. So I've mentioned that I love complex science science, complex system science. And basically in complex systems, they talk about the fractal nature of things, which means when you see a hole and then you go and you examine it closer, you see holes within holes. And when I mean holes, I don't mean hole, I mean like the hole. So there's holes within holes, there's complex systems within complex systems. And that's kind of what's going on here. So basically now we're going into another layer of specificity where we create domain and age group specific exit standards. These are much more specific, okay? These are going to be more detail to the learning outcomes that we just delineated. So this is if you want to create a very extensive curriculum, a very specific one, okay? An example of this might be, let's see, instead of saying they need to be able to dominate a variety of 1v1 situations, you would break it down into all the different 1v1 situations that there are. So they need to understand how to win the 1 versus 1 when there's an opponent closing them down from a lateral position. 1 versus 1 when the opponent is in a frontal position and I'm facing them. 1 versus 1 when I'm receiving a ball and there's opponent on my back. So as you kind of see how this is developing, now this is giving me even more detail into the things that I need to plan in terms of my sessions, because now I say, okay, now they don't have to just be good at 101, but there's these specific 1v1s that they have to be good in. And that's going to give me even more of a reference in terms of how I direction the way that I instruct. So this is the very specific, what will the students learn? Okay. These are directly aligned with the outcomes. So the learning outcomes that you just came up with, this will then just create more detail. Okay, so it's important to note that although we define global objectives, as well as the domain-specific outcomes and standards for each age group, again, we believe in an integrated and global approach. Okay, this is a non-linear sport, and it requires players to interpret the game in an organic manner. So these are just disclaimers before I go into my examples. Okay, another disclaimer is, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is that due to biological and chronological ages potentially differing at different stages of development for a different individual, and skill level differences being different between individuals of the same biological or chronological age, players may not follow the age range pathway in a linear manner. You might have the majority of your U12 players on that kind of age range pathway, but you're for sure going to have some players that are behind and they need to be treated a little bit different, and some players that are very accelerated, and they should also have a more individualized plan. So here's an example sorry, one more disclaimer. I also think it's important that we distinguish between two stages in the program. So the stages that I have found that are important are around U6 to U14, which is pre-puberty and the player heading into puberty. And then U15 to U23, which is you're in puberty or you're leaving or out of puberty. So when I go through my examples, that's how I structured my own curriculum, right? I built a curriculum that focused more on the U6 through U14. And within those, I have different age ranges. And then I had a U15 through U23. And within those, I had the specific age ranges also. Okay, so this is the example starting with step 3, which we talked about were the global objectives. So my age range that I used is U11 through 14. Okay, example here for a global objective is to focus on functional and general small group cooperation while enhancing each player's attachment and joy with the ball and the sport. Okay, a second one, a priority is placed on learning and decision making through game-related experiences while continuing to stimulate multilateral movement. The reason I say while continuing multilateral movement is because obviously multilateral movement was really, really important and a priority in the age range below. Variability and coordination is prioritized during this period. The developmental focus to prepare and transition players for the change from 9v9 to 11v11 during this age group. And then I have a breakdown of the reason I showed you my principles earlier was so that you guys would understand this breakdown, where I focus 60% on fundamentals and priorities, 30% on the main collective principles, only 5% on specific area specific and preferred positional interactions, and 5% on game scenario solutions. Sorry, before I move on, it's not important what I have here, okay? You guys probably have much better ideas. What's important is that you can kind of see how I start in this on this step 3 in terms of just giving me a global idea of what I want during this age group, more or less what I think should happen for the player. This is part of the same the global objective step. I just wanted to show you that I created a working priority by age group that gave me a direction more or less in terms of what I focus on. So U4 through U6, for example, you can see there, based on what I talked about early on the way that I structure my principles, 100% is focused on fundamentals and principles. U7 through U10, it's still 85% fundamentals and priorities, but I start to add some collective general principles. U11 through U14, we start to see, this is the one that I just described, so we start to see just little stimuluses of some preferred positional interactions where we really, really start talking about system and what system does the opponent play. U15 through U17, the main principles become really, really important, collective principles, and area specific and preferred positional interactions start to become very important. With fundamentals and priorities, still an important stimulus, but you can see it's much less. And then solution to game scenarios. And then U18 through U23, it's just refining those fundamentals and priorities and really focusing on hammering in main principles, area specific and preferred positional interactions, and solution to game scenarios. So I wanted to give you that so you could have a little context as to why my global objectives were what they were for the 11 through 14 age group. So example of, so now we're in step 4. So we talked about the benchmarks and the stages of learning with the learning outcomes. I want to define my learning outcomes for you guys so you guys can know how I work. But I want a disclaimer that these are just words. These are the words that I decided to use based on my physical education background that I like. But it can be as simple as stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. It can be basic, intermediate, advanced. It can be whatever language your club wants. What's important is that you do have a language and you have a thought out process for why. So I take this from a physical education background. So learning is a process that evolves over time, right? We all agree with that. And when we define the global objectives as well as the outcomes and standards, it's important to identify what stage do we expect the players to be at each one. So for me, the first stage is introduction stage. So this is basically where players are just receiving introductory opportunities to experience and explore a skill or movement. So these are going to be very, very often in the youngest age groups. I'm introducing these things. They're at an introduction level because it's the first time they've experienced it. The next stage for me is emerging elementary stages. So this is an initial stage of learning. So now the introduction has been had and they've had enough time to express some learning. There may be several different stages inside this one stage, but we're going to just talk about the overall elementary stage. And this involves gaining rapidly improved motor control, rhythmic coordination, and cognitive efficiency and decisiveness, albeit inconsistent performance. So basically what this tells me is that learning is explosive, you see big improvements, but the performance kit from one rep to another can be up and down. So it's pretty volatile in terms of the consistency of the performance. The third stage for me is proficient stages. So this is a secondary stage of learning, also of which there may be several within this one, where the movement or the behaviors become mechanically efficient, coordinated, controlled, and consistent in performance. But it's not automatized. So the way that I look at that, the way that I define it for myself is that the movement is not fully fluid and subconscious yet. You know, the movement is still very conscious effort. They do it well. They're consistent with it, but you can see that they're still very much trying to make the effort so that the solution or the action takes place. Whereas refining stage is my fourth stage, and this is the final stage of learning for me, of which there are several also, but this involves the automatization of mechanically efficient, coordinated, controlled, and consistent performance. So this is basically the proficient stage, except for now the movement is fluid. It's subconscious. The player is not thinking when they do it. They're just doing. They're completely in the stage of doing. And I know you guys don't know our staff, but we have a assistant coach here. His name is Peter Lucene, and he played in Atletico Madrid, big time player, great coach, better human being. But I use him as an example because we coach pro players here. Peter's played Champions League, and Peter's 42, I think. And when he strikes a ball, it's different. It's different. And it's so ingrained in him how it's just easy, fluid movement. There's no thought process to it. And I explained that he's at very advanced levels of the refining stage. Whereas we have pro players here who are also at refining stages, but you can still see a little bit of a difference. And then you'll see our U17 and our U16 players hitting that same long ball. And I can clearly see them more in proficient stages where they can do it. They do it consistently, but there's an effort to their action. There's an effort to their coordination. And then you go to another age group below and you see emerging elementary stages where when they try really hard, they can get it. And they weren't able to do it a month ago, but now they're starting to be able to do it and hit that same long ball. But it takes a lot of effort, and they hit 2 good ones and then they hit 3 bad ones, you know? So hopefully that gives you guys just a little bit clearer of an idea for this next example that I'm going to give. Okay, so learning outcomes. So this was in the U4 to U14. Remember I said I also delineated them into 2 different groups, right? The post-puberty and pre-puberty, more or less. So for the U14 through U4 through U14 age group, technical coordination, we go, I would like the U4 through U8s to reach introduction levels, U9 through U12, emerging elementary, which is my second stage, and U13 through U14, proficient stages of technical coordination with ball manipulation. The player will be able to manipulate the ball in a variety of ways through dribbling, striking, and receiving by the end of the competitive year. As you can see, that doesn't provide too much detail, but at least I'm starting to grow in terms of the structure that I want to provide. From a tactical perspective, same U4 through U14. We would like U4 through U6 to reach introduction level, U7 through U10, emerging elementary, which is the second stage, and U11 through U14 to reach the proficient stages, which is the third stage, of the ability to dominate a variety of 1v1 situations by the end of the competitive year. My second one is introduction, emerging elementary for 8s through 10. So I have adjusted it because it's a little bit more complex, and proficient 11 through 14 to dominate a variety of 2v1 situations. Okay, and so on and so on. The one that I'm going to focus on here is the last one, which is in bold. It's reaching an introductory level for U7s and 8s, emerging elementary for 9s and 10s, and proficient for 11 and 12, and refining stage. So the last stage, they should be very comfortable in it. U13, U14, for the ability to identify and execute possession fundamentals. Okay. And so as you can see here, just with this, and this is just a snapshot of all the different learning outcomes I might have, I'm already starting to see some things that I need to make sure are implemented in the training long term, in terms of a variety of 1v1 situations, a variety of 2v1 situations, a variety of possession and ball recovery situations from 2v2, 3v2, 3v2, 3v3, 4v4, 5v5, 6v6, and possession fundamentals, which is that block in my game model where I have principles, and I have that, and I say, okay, they need to learn these principles during these age ranges. So we just talked about the learning outcome, and now we go even more detail. So let me go back to this example here, where basically all I said was they need to have ball manipulation. They need to be able to reach these levels of ball manipulation in terms of dribbling, striking, and receiving. Okay. Well, when we talk about the exit strategy now, or the exit standards, now we go into more detail. Okay. So these must be achieved by the end of U14. These are the exit standards that provide exactly what ball manipulation I want them to be able to achieve. So we want them to dribble the ball with multiple surfaces of the foot, inside, outside the sole. They need to be able to dribble at various speeds and have the ability to change speed with the ball, cut with the ball at all of these different degrees with outside foot, inside foot, sole, chipping the ball, and jumping after cuts. They need to be able to execute dynamic moves and fakes, and a combination of dynamic moves and fakes to beat a defender. So I include a few of the moves. And these are, I call a dynamic move, a move that it becomes explosive. So it takes you into an explosive movement past somebody. Whereas they also need to be able to execute evasive moves, or a combination of evasive moves, which these are less explosive. These are moves that are just supposed to gain me time in a shorter space. They should be able to efficiently shield the ball by demonstrating proper body and ball placement when dribbling. Again, this is a snapshot. This is, I'm not showing you guys everything, but I want to give you guys a little bit more of a specific example when I talk about what the exit standards are. So by the end of U14, they need to be able to do these things. In terms of a technical tactical, because that for me is the most interesting one, your exit standards are going to be part of your game model principles. So it doesn't make sense to write your game model principles twice. You just know what level they're supposed to kind of be at, whether it's emerging elementary, proficient, or refining stages of the different parts of your game model. You can you can set a plan that I want them to be in a refining stage by the end of U14 of the fundamentals. And when I say, okay, Mikey, what are the fundamentals? I need to go to my fundamentals that I have, and I say, okay, and I start planning for those principles to make sure that they are stimulated within my training environment. So those were the examples of the steps for curriculum specific, but the program continues. So I want to continue too. Step 6 is now we strategize the implementation of the content delivery. So how are we going to get the learning through? How will the learning take place? And this is going to be methodology in terms of what kind of exercises we use, what kind of rules we use. That's a whole nother presentation. So is teaching and learning principles. What are our behaviors? How do we teach? How do we interact? How do we get behaviors to emerge without just always giving them the answers? And then lastly, we need to plan for the timing of the delivery of the instruction. So that's the periodization, as I mentioned earlier. When will I do what during a calendar year, basically? All of these topics are too big of topics for me to go into any more detail, so I apologize, guys. But you guys know all of them. Step 7, again, huge step, execute the program. You need to go in there, do the work. you should be doing what you planned. Otherwise, the planning didn't make any sense. But you execute and you give it your best. And then step 8 is we strategize the implementation for evaluating the effectiveness of the program. So for me, I think this is huge. It's important that we have the self-analysis, okay? But it's also important that we get external analysis. And I don't think enough people do this, because we need to remember the two programs. There's the plan we have for the ideal program, but then there's the reality of the program, what actually happens. And we need to find out what the difference is. And through self-analysis, of course, we can come to meaningful conclusions. If we have analysis from within the club, whether it be directors or whatever, helping the coaches analyze themselves, that's going to give even another layer of insight. But I strongly recommend that having external sources of evaluation coming in who have no vested interest in you or the program, coming in and just doing a clean evaluation, taking a week to see how you're doing and giving you feedback on what they see there. I find that you get huge benefit from that. Benjamin can attest to this, but some of my greatest experiences in terms of feedback I've had about program development and programs I run have been the double pass experiences I had at Sacramento Republic and FC Dallas. And just the ability to sit down with someone who knows very well but does not have a vested interest. So there's no ulterior motive towards giving feedback or not giving feedback, because we do that sometimes with our own bias, right? Even as a director, we see things, it's not exactly right, but it's okay. Where somebody from the outside, they're going to come in and they're going to tell you how it is. And so I find it super helpful. For me, it's important, although there will be a difference between the theoretical program and the actual program, I cannot overvalue stating that the program that you plan and the program that you implement should be age specific, skill level specific, needs, values, and motivation specific. It's up to us. It's our responsibility to make sure that we're not using a cookie cutter program. We're not using a cookie cutter coaching. I think that one of the mistakes that I made as a younger coach was if I had 3 U9 teams, I treated them all the same, even though this team here was the team that had the most players that were probably going to go on to play college. This team was kind of a mix, and this team was there for fun, for recreational purpose, for fitness purposes. And I learned quickly that was wrong. And it's really important to know that maybe the trainings can be very similar, the learning outcomes, but you need to individualize at every single level to make sure that everybody's needs, values, and motivations are met. Step 9 is we make adjustments to the curriculum and program based on the findings. This is key. So we need to understand if, what, when, how, and why anything needs to change or be adjusted. And we shouldn't be afraid to make adjustments. And we also shouldn't be afraid to say, I recognize this feedback, but I'm okay with it because of this. What's important here is I want to stress that the analysis of the performance of the program and the decision of whether or not to take action needs to be one that's really, really respected. And I feel like there are times that we get so busy in our lives that we plan, we do, and then we just do the same thing over and we get into that rhythm. And even though we might do a quick self-analysis, we don't actually think hard about, okay, what changes do I actually need to make? Or what changes do I not need to make, but know why I'm not making those changes. And having that deep reflection, thought process, again, from internal sources, but also from external sources, is absolutely key. So the question is, why do we take all these steps? You know, wouldn't it be easier just to plan session to session and teach football? Like, we're football people. We should just teach football. It's not this complicated, Mikey. And you're right and you're wrong all at the same time. I think that the level of detail of what you go into is up to you. It's not only up to your decision, but it's up to your environment, whether you have time or you don't have time, whether you have a club where you work full time in, or whether it's a club where all the coaches have jobs and then they come and do this to help out the community. So all of those things will adjust how much detail you go in. But I think that at some level, planning is fundamental. It's fundamental. So even if you just do some of it at the more global levels, you will see, in my opinion, a more cohesive and directioned effort from your club. But yeah, it would be easy. But this is, for me, a systemic and organized way to ensure learning takes place, and that the teaching and learning process is purposeful and meaningful. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to guarantee you all the learning is going to take place, because that's what the evaluation and the self-reflection and the adjustment steps are for. Because I need to find out where I'm messing up, because for sure I'm going to mess up. The plan is never going to be perfect. And the plan is going to change every year. This is not a machine that I build once and is ready to go. This is a living system that's going to grow. It's going to expand, contract. It's going to suffer in a certain area until it gets fixed. It's going to be amazing at times. And it's going to be constantly evolving. At this point, though, we have a comprehensive map from which we can better understand what the players should be able to do at different age group ranges, at different age groups. And everything moving forward should be linked to these learning objectives. So the next steps is, now I'm starting to plan my sessions, right? I get into the nitty gritty of the details of what I do from session to session. But if we take these steps, we provide ourselves much more clarity when it comes. So as everybody has at some point or another, I went from day to day, and then I evolved, and I went from week to week, and then I evolved, and I said, okay, you know what? I think I should put a plan together for 2-3 weeks. And little by little, I got to the point, also with some of my my educational background, realizing that I was kind of going the wrong way, and I had to go the opposite way. But it's important no matter what. I stand by it, and I will do it for the rest of my career at all the levels that I'm at. Here's something that I wanted to, a visual that I wanted to give you guys. So these are all the steps that we talked about: community player analysis, mission, goals, values, evaluation, adjustment, program execution. It's everything we just talked about. But I want to give you this visual to show that how everything interacts, and that, you know, if I pull the curriculum piece out and I hold it over here, neither one of the two things are the same. The curriculum is not the same anymore, and the program is not the same. So it's really important to know that the curriculum is only the curriculum because of the interaction it has with all these other elements. And so when we think about our program, I really hope that we think about it as an integrated whole of many parts. So recommendations that I have based on this information is, number one, I think everyone should aim for a club-wide curriculum. Okay, I know that's not possible for everybody. So if that's not possible, the age group, if we can't do the whole club, can we have specific leaders in the club who are able to create a curriculum for the different age groups? That's a good step. Okay, the key would be the club needs to have a clear game model. The club needs to have clear mission, vision, and values, have done the analysis, have clear player profiles, so that those leaders are directioned in a proper way. It's not just the leaders doing whatever they want. Okay. If that's not possible, which may not be possible, maybe the curriculum can be individual coach driven. Okay. Again, that's fine, as long as the club's mission, vision, values, game model, player profiles, the parts step 1 and step 2 are very clear to everybody. But again, I would say if the club is capable, having a leadership component to do this, to pull a club-wide curriculum is the best. Sections would be the next best. Individual coaches would be the last step. Number 2, managing alignment without micromanaging. So coaches are like players, okay? We all vary in degrees of talent, motivation, experience, and we have to be managed on an individual basis. So for leadership, we need to know that coaches are human beings that have all their own different needs, values, experiences, motivations. I'll give you a story. For me, for example, when I went to Sacramento Republic, and Benjamin mentioned that, I went there gung-ho. Like, I was so excited. And I went there and I feel like I did a pretty good job of implementing something that had a big impact for those age groups that I had. But I also had a very interesting interaction where one of my coaches, who was less experienced, really, really liked how demanding I was in the beginning in terms of what exercises should be run on a day-to-day basis for the age group. And I noticed another coach who was a soldier and an amazing coach who also appreciated it, but I noticed there was a little bit of friction. And when I decided to talk to both of them, we would always meet as a staff. We did a really good job there of getting together as all the age groups together, but also our separate little sections. And I got feedback from both of them. The coach that had less experience felt like he was learning so much. You know, he hadn't done this before. So having this A, B, C, D, step by step, this is what you should do, was super helpful for him. While the other coach, who had huge experience and enjoyed the kind of the structure that I provided in terms of topics and in terms of learning outcomes, had his own exercises that he already had in his mental bank. And here he was trying to force an exercise that I had on paper and I explained, but that he didn't have it so integrated. So he didn't feel it was as powerful in his moment of coaching. And when I found that out, it was quick. Hey, if you have a different exercise that you can get these topics through, boom, do it. Maybe there's these 4 exercises that we need to do every once in a while, but there's no way I need to make sure that you're doing every single exercise, because that's going to be the same way I say as players. That's going to be me limiting the coaching staff to my own knowledge, when what I want them to do is to be at a certain level. So the younger coaches who need help to get that A, B, C, D, E, so they can develop some experience. But then I need those coaches to explore and to experience their own ideas, because often they might come up with better ideas than you, which is the best thing that can ever happen. It's never the worst thing that could ever happen. So that's kind of what I meant about managing alignment without micromanaging. I think understanding your coaching staff is really important. So who are the coaches who need more direction and more help? And who are the coaches who need less direction and less help and just need basically a target to hit? And for me, what a huge learning lesson that was, is to identify your coaching staff as equally as individualistic as your players. And you have those coaches that you need to just give that target to and say, run with it. And you have coaches who need step-by-step instruction for a while. And guess what? They're going to develop to a certain point where they're not going to need that anymore. And then you need to start just throwing the target for them. The third one was time and human capital investment. So I suggest for this process of program development, curriculum development, it should not be one person doing it. You know, as romantic as it is, you know, the historic poet under candlelight with a glass of wine writing a memoir, the program, game model, all of this stuff should be a collective effort. It's something that I think we did really well at Sacramento Republic, where we would meet once a week. and we would go through basically a philosophy, right? We might have some starting points, but then we would debate things would get changed, things would get erased. And if we were all still there now, the document would look totally different than what it looked like when I left off with the project, because it's important. It's an evolving thing, but it's important to have everybody's input. Getting ideas and brainstorming from age group leadership is really important, because as much as like experience as I might think I have, when I'm a director and now I'm in charge of a whole different level of thing, and you lose a little bit of touch of working the day to day with the age groups, it's really important to know what those guys see, because they see it every day in the smallest of details. And so just giving them stuff from the top down, in my opinion, is a big mistake from a leader. Assigning different blocks, I think, is an important thing to help make the project more manageable. So meeting together and then giving assignments. Hey, you guys are kind of more in charge of these age group ranges. We'll come back. We'll get to collective. People will present, and then we'll keep forming it together. And the main message here is to make this an us project. I think an us project is key. Me project is a good experience for you to do on your own, but from a leadership perspective, I don't find it to be the right way. And then the last suggestion I have is start somewhere. Remember, it's a living system. So it's overwhelming, right? As 8 steps, it seems so huge. The methodology, all that stuff is huge stuff. Just start somewhere. It will never be perfect. It will never be perfect. It will always evolve. It will always change. Mine is changing. Even while I put together this presentation, I was looking at it and I was like, oh yeah, I would change that. I would change that. I'm not working right now at the youth level, but when I go back, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to review it and I'm going to change it, and I'm going to go get feedback from people. So start little by little. Don't get overwhelmed. Even though we know the whole is important, don't get overwhelmed with the whole. Start somewhere and start putting things together little by little, and really view it from a long-term perspective in terms of a living system, and not something that you need to build perfectly right now so that it's perfect. Well, again, guys, thank you. I'm sorry if I went a little bit longer than I was supposed to, but again, I tried to pack. You guys asked for depth, so I tried to pack as much as I could in, and I really appreciate it. Again, if you guys have any questions or comments before you guys go, I just want to say thank you to anybody who is willing to listen. If you ever want to reach out to me, ask me a question or tell me I'm stupid, I don't know, anything, I'm good. I love debating and talking about these things.
Okay, Val Henderson said
Mikey.
this kicked ass. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we have some questions.
Yep.
Periodization. You used the term periodization, then you said timing and delivery. And I notice a lot of people are talking about periodization of under 10s. But when you look up the term periodization, it generally means trying to peak at a certain time, right? Achieve peak performance at a certain time. How do you jive the two? Do you periodize an under 8 player, or do you plan?
No. You plan. So for a U8 player, honestly, so I look at it from 2 perspectives, right? So when I was with the 17s here at FC Dallas, I had my periodization, which was my yearly plan. So I kind of decided when and what I was going to teach in what section of the year. But you're right. I also had certain moments of the year, right, leading into Dallas Cup, leading into Showcase, where I wanted to make sure the boys were flying. No, that very specific definition of periodization in terms of peaking the player, I wouldn't do until it's a player that's fully mature and fully matured and at a level that they need to perform at a peak performance in terms of, I don't know, college showcase or a national championship or something like that. In fact, I'm the opposite. For the younger players, I like warm-ups. I get in an argument all the time with our physical guys when I first got here. Like for me, the warm-up for the U12s shouldn't look like the warm-up for the U19 team. Like it shouldn't, the warm up for the 7 teams is short and crisp. Why? Because I want the team flying from the first minute. For the U12s at Republic, I basically told everybody, hey, this is going to be an extra training session. So they're going to be a little tired when the game starts, and I'm cool with it.
Yeah. But I'm wondering, is periodization the correct term to use for youth planning?
Ooh.
A lot of people are going and they're using periodization as an example of why talking about younger teams, and I think it's coming from US Soccer. They're using periodization instead of planning.
You know what? I think timing and delivery is probably for the younger age groups the best term. Because
but the overall, so you call it timing and delivery. Okay.
Yeah, because so for example, because the program, right? There's planning. Planning is all of it. Planning is all
planning. Yeah.
What we're going to teach, how we're going to teach, when we're going to teach, with what we're going to teach, where we're going to teach. All of that needs to be planned. But the when we're going to teach is kind of what I meant by that. But I think I agree with you, especially if that's the interpretation in terms of peaking now. Timing of delivery.
Yeah, and just preparedness. We haven't played soccer for a year. Kids haven't played games. And I've been on meetings where people are saying, well, we need to periodize our under 10 so that they're ready in 4 weeks when they're ready like that.
No.
And I think that this focus on, I started to research periodization, and I think it's being used loosely by US Soccer and by people. So that was a question I had.
Yes.
Here's one, Logan Lee. Regarding automation, do you believe that comes in later stage of development as opposed to happening at each stage? In other words, do you not try to achieve automation at the exit benchmark?
Automation is a weird word. It's a super technical physical education word. For me, what I mean from my personal program development in terms of automation is just unconscious fluid movement. So when we walk, it's automatic. It's automatic. We don't have to think. We're going. When we drive our car, we got it automatic. When we were 16 and we first got our license, driving the car was not automatic. We had to really think about it. Our hands gripped the wheel a little bit harder. We had to check our shoulders way more. We'd get on the freeway too slow, too fast. And then just eventually it started becoming second nature. So the exit standards, I would say it's not the automation is not at the end of every exit standard, because the automation for me is going to happen not for everybody, but typically over the course of a long time. It's going to happen later. So based on his question, the older you get is when I think automation is going to be more clear. But it also depends on the skill, right? For much more simple and rudimentary skills, especially like fundamental motor skills, okay, those are going to get automatized much earlier, or get to that stage, that proficient stage where it's fluid and and unconscious movement. My opinion is that can happen way earlier, but when it comes to very complex football skills, I think it takes a long time.
Okay.
Again, I don't want people to get too caught up in the language though, because what's important about the language is that you have a clear definition for it, and that you express your definition to the people that you're working with. So, for example, Benjamin bringing up the point about periodization or the automation. As long as you have it clear in the people you're working with, so you're moving in the right direction and there's clarity there, that's what's most important. You know what I mean? And because like when we talk about football, all of us talk with a slightly different language, whether we call it attacking mid, interior, creative midfielder, whatever. But most of us know what we're talking about, no matter what you say, because we've all been together. But what's important is that we have a language that directions your group the right way. Like there shouldn't be anybody that is confused within my program by what I mean by that, by the language I use. If that's the case, then I'm in trouble.
All right. You have game model is one of the things that you need to set up early. I know you guys have had 7 first team coaches at FC Dallas and its history. You guys have a very specific way of playing that may be different than the coach before Oscar. You are also a selling club. Would it be, could you argue, like Real Madrid, who has no system of play through their youth? They allow every coach to adapt according to their experiences and their player pool. Could you argue that that's not a better way, given that most clubs will develop players for they don't know who, which college or which professional program, and that players should be able to adapt and play multiple systems?
So that's why I have in my, if I go back here, the way that I look at the game model. So my short answer to you is no, you should have a game model. But my long answer is, when you talk about preferred positional interactions and game solutions, which become very, this is where it becomes system specific. I think those are the least important parts. Making sure your footballers know how to play football, no matter what system they play in, is this fundamentals would be, if I go play futsal, if I go play street ball, if I go play at Ajax, if I go play at Inter Milan, I'm going to need to be able to do these things well to play football. And same thing with the main principles. Main principles are in terms of, I'll give you an example for me, like in the build-up, try to find the free man, okay? And then another one, once a free man is found with space looking forward, accelerate forward. These are also things, they're just more collective now. These are a little bit more individual, collective, that are important, whether you play 3-4-3, 3-5-2, low block team, high block team, you play in Germany, Belgium. Okay, maybe here, preferred positional interactions, that can be a little bit between the two of them, but these two for sure are very system specific. For me, they're the least important. And that's why you only work them even a little bit towards the later part of the development of the player. Because what's more important is that the player can do these things really, really well and adapt, like you're saying, anywhere they're sold. Okay, because that's the key. Like what I don't want is a player go, man, Mikey, I loved playing for you because it was so easy, but I can't play for this other guy. You know, they think maybe they'll give you a compliment, but trust me, it's not a compliment. You need to look in the mirror as a coach. If players tell you, I with you it was so easy, but I can't play for this other guy. I can't play for this guy. Instead, I want the player who doesn't even know I taught him anything, who just every age group they go, they every coach they go, every club they go, they adapt. They remember how you treated them as a person, of course. They love and respect you. They know you taught them something, but they kind of have this feeling like, oh, I always knew how to do this. And oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I can do that. That's what I want as a result of coaching, that the players forget that I even taught them anything and can't remember specific things like, oh, I know that I can play only 4-3-3 with point down because I memorized every positional interaction. You know, Mikey, he programmed me like a little computer to know every single one. But then I went and had to go play 3-5-2 or 4-4-2 flat, and I didn't know what to do. And I guess so. I agree with you 1,000%. But I'm saying the same thing as you are.
Okay. Hey, there's one here where interested in FC Dallas approach at 9 through 14's age level specifically to better meet the needs of those players who seem to get lost in shuffle with bigger, stronger, faster athletes dominate and get more minutes, more coaching time. He's talking about sort of results versus late bloomers.
So
how do you guys handle that?
So 9 through 14. So I'll tell you this. So the 12s, 11s.
It'd probably be a little older, right? It could be 13s through 15s is more when it comes out.
Well, one thing I know is that the club has a fully funded program from 10 and up. So and they've had that for the last 3 years. So even though the academy started at 12, 10s and 11s were funded. The other thing that the club has to its advantage is they have like 10 teams per age group. So it's like it's a massive club. So I can't speak too much for the youth program, but in terms of once they hit the academy, which is more U10, U11, U12, the club very specifically looks for talent. So we'll have little guys like, for example, when I first got here at U15, I had a kid, Aiden Nokus. He was by far the smallest guy on the team. He didn't play a ton with that O2 age group because it was super talented. When he came with me and some of the guys got pushed up, he started playing more. When he got pushed up to where those guys always were, he started playing less. The way that I see that the club takes care of that is that they find game opportunities in other ways. So maybe if the player doesn't play, like Aiden, for example, every single weekend, even because he's small and he's a late bloomer, every Monday night he would go play in a men's league game. After training, he would do a double session. He would do the regen session in the morning, and then at night he would go play at least 45, 60 minutes against a men's league team. In the younger age groups, Chris Hayden's our academy director, and I know that he does a good job controlling and just making sure that, hey guys, listen, your job is not to win. Okay, there are certain times where we need to go and we need to compete harder, right? There are competitive rivalries that, trust me, here in Texas, it's competitive, man. It is crazy. Where, hey, we're going to beat this team. Okay, but we're not afraid to do it with younger players playing up. Okay, and we're not afraid to doing it with a style that we want to project through the academy. I'm not sure I answered his question because it was.
I think you do. You're in a club that's going to nurture talent. So
hey, it's a selling club. It's like you said, it's a selling club. I talked to my first year here. I had the U15s. I went 17-0 with them, and at 17-0, I looked around and I looked at my defense and I said, what am I doing? And I had two players playing center back that had no chance of playing professionally. I had two wingers who weren't going to play professionally as wingers, but they're tremendous athletes and amazing kids and good skill. And I went and talked to Chris and Lucci, and I told them my dilemma. And I said, I'm going to change these two wingers into center backs for the rest of the season. Are you guys cool with that? And they were both like, do it. And I ended up losing three or four out of my last 6 games. They were directly at fault for most of the goals in terms of defensive positioning or just nervous in the buildup. But at the end of the day, Justin Che is at Bayern Munich with the U23s right now as a 17-year-old, and he's one of those wingers that we moved at U15, and we started losing it. And trust me, I'm competitive. And trust me, we competed in every game. It wasn't like, oh, don't worry, guys, let's just go out and have fun. No, every game was to win. He was crying after games when he helped, when he led to maybe some goals. But I knew it. We knew like he could do it in this position. Who cares? We're gonna run the risk. And at the end of the day, my thought process was, I'm gonna long term be judged here on how many professional players came through my teams, not on how many 18-0 seasons I had in the academy at FC Dallas. And I think that's a really, really important concept that the club maintains.
The players that come through to the first team, is it clear, and when it is, how young that they have the talent to make it to the highest level, and how important is that innate talent?
Oh, the talent is everything, man. I mean,
Yeah.
Nurture and nature, they go hand in hand. It's complex system, but at the end of the day, if you randomly select 11 kids and give them to me to coach them, no, let's say we give them to Pep Guardiola to coach them from U9 until U18, or you carefully select. I'm not gonna say U9. Let's call it U13, U14, because that's kind of right around puberty. I feel is when you really start to get a better sense, because you see how they're gonna come out of puberty. A lot of people code this way, and a lot of people surprise you and come out. But right around puberty, okay, Pep, make as many as possible, and you give somebody who just gonna make sure the practices are really intense and competitive, and there's ball, and you give them very selected players, they're gonna have a better chance of bringing out a pro. So Ricardo Pepi, the guy was a super talent since he was 8 years old. You know, after puberty, he lost all his baby weight. He was more explosive, but the talent was there from the beginning, you know. And all my job when I had Pepe, for example, and I had him in that first year too with my U16 group, is I told him, I'm not going to tell you what to do in the box because you have an instinct in the box, and I'm going to mess you up. And he kind of laughed because he asked me one day, what should I have shot that with this? I said, don't tell me, don't ask me that. What do you think he should have done? He said, I don't know. I felt pretty good. He hit it with the outside of his foot. I said, yeah, it looked pretty good to me. But I'm going to help you learn how to press. I'm going to help you learn how to associate in the buildup and how to hold, because he was he played small, even though he's a big guy. I'm going to help you do these 3 or 4 things. That's my job. I'm going to be on you. And but Pepe is here at this level because of Pepe, not because of me. So for me, it's talent is huge. And when do we know? We start deciphering around, I don't know, U12 through U14. We have like ideas, like, okay, we think these kids are very talented, and they might be late bloomers. We might look at them and be like, man, if this guy grows, he's going to be amazing. Or it might be, hey, if this guy keeps growing, he's going to be amazing. I would say around U15, U16, we started making serious decisions. This guy's a professional. This guy's not a professional. When they first show up, it takes them a little bit of adjusting. It took Pepe 3 weeks. He's a super talent. It might take another guy 6 months to adapt. For me, the biggest question mark is inside their head. You know, they have all the skill, they have all the athleticism, they're good kids, but how will they react to the added pressure of having to play against men, with men, in that kind of cutthroat environment where now all of a sudden the coaches aren't, you know, that kind of goes to like, exactly. So it's like you're just out of the exercise for like 30 minutes straight and you're off to the side doing something with the physical coach, and guess what? And hey, we need them for a rep in, and you got to do good. Like how they react to those moments, not playing for a long time. Those are the ones that are hardest for me to like anticipate, I guess, to say.
Okay, here's a great question from Nate. Can you give us some other examples of how complex science, system science informs your coaching? Nate Boyden.
Yeah.
Probably beat you with the Chicago Fire, right? A few times.
Okay. So for me, one thing is that simple rules in complex systems emerges great complexity. So that's something that's really important for me. So like, even though in my, like, if you look at my game model, it's like, it's ridiculous. Like it's way too detailed. It's way too long, but it's not for the players. It's for me. It's for me to be able to conceptualize what I want to see, and then I need to go on the field and match it. In a million years, would I give my players the game model and try to tell them to memorize it, you know, because it's just a bunch of detail that's going to actually, it's going to fill their head with things that they need to think about, which then is going to not allow complex things to emerge. So for me, on the field, in terms of instructing the players, in terms of stimulating the players with the most simple feedback possible, that then guides the emergence of behaviors, that's the key. Instead of saying, you guys need to know how to do this pattern every time we play against a team that does this, because guess what? If the team adjusts, they're going to have to adapt. And the best way to adapt is to have simple rules that allow you to adapt to your environment very well and have different behaviors and interactions emerge based on what you are confronted with instead of what you have memorized inside your head. So I think that's one of the biggest things that complex science tells me, which is, again, I'll say it again, from simple guidelines and rules, a lot of complexity can emerge. And by changing something with something simple, you can change a system very simply. And, you know, I guess the old adage of like, one bad apple, right, can change everything. It's very true. So it's just like one small change here has a big effect on the system, and you can't control it as a coach. You can't control certainties. So don't try to control certainties. You need to try to control probabilities. And when you try to control certainties, for example, you're going to try to have players memorize things and become maybe mini robots. But again, now they are limited to my knowledge. And I'm sorry, that's not going to cut it for me. You know, I want them to explode past my knowledge and to have behaviors emerge that I didn't even think of. That for me is one of the keys to coaching, and complex system science taught me that.
All right. Why 2 attacking phases? Build up and scoring.
Because of the simplicity reasons for me. So I think, and again, this is just personal things, but I want my team in the build up to be trying to find a free man. And once we find a free man with space, I want to accelerate to goal. If the other team, so now I'm scoring. If I'm accelerating to goal, I'm in a scoring phase. I'm thinking about going to goal, runs, shots, whatever. If the other team recovers and organizes themselves before I can make some sort of final action, and now that free man is no longer a free man, I'm going back to trying to find an advantage to accelerate the play again towards the goal. And so just for me, it's helped me simplify the way that I see the game. I still have a lot of principles that you would say, oh, that actually fits in the generate attack phase from the old Dutch system, or that's actually the possession phase. And that's great if people want to break it down even more. But for me, I just wanted to keep it very simple. We're trying to find an advantage. We're exploiting the advantage.
All right. Interesting. Final one. I actually have to go. You guys can keep going after, but I'll ask this. Nacho Zarate, what are your thoughts on the method style of play that's common from 77, 99, and 11-11? Is too much time is it too much time tactics? You just you deleted it.
Sorry, Benjamin. I clicked on I already clicked on answered, so go to the answer.
Is it too much time tactically?
Yeah, yes. I think 7v7 in the younger age groups, me personally, I want my team to play. I want to see a good football. But I don't mind seeing a little bit of a messy team. In fact, when I look at a team, U12, U13, U11, U10, I mean, if the team looks like a bunch of mini adults playing, I get a little concerned personally. I want to see a little messiness. I want to see what we call in Spanish recursos, which is it's like resources, individual resources in terms of flair, which means they need to mess up, which means they need to be slightly out of a structure when they do that. And I think that's really important because there's plenty of time to take those very adaptable players and get them structurized. I'm not saying they should have no structure. Don't get me wrong. I want to see a semblance of a style of play, of some good interactions. And I will say, in my opinion, even my own past experience, all of us have gone through all the phases where I had teams that were not structurally good, but they were creative as heck. And then I went the other way, and I had teams that were too structured. And little by little, I try to find the balance at the right time in the player's career. But I do agree with that I think in the younger age groups, we have to be careful with doing too much of that.
Okay. I think that's it. A lot of thanks here. People want you to come back in person. They want to see you in your hat. A few people have asked. They asked if you have cowboy boots and spurs. Do you have a firearm now that you live in Texas?
No.
Now, a lot of people are expressing their appreciation.
Yeah, well, I appreciate everybody taking the time again. And
yeah,
you guys
this was great.
me, Benji. I'm always grateful to NorCal. I hope everybody is, because you guys have done so much for everybody. Honestly, I say this to everybody. I'm sitting here, but you guys are here sitting with me. Trust me, because your guys is everything I've learned and the things that I say, the things that I do on the field. These things came from my education, from NorCal, from Burlingame Soccer Club, De Anza, from all the people that I interacted with during those crucial years. So, you know, anytime the team wins or something happens for me, like you guys are here with me for sure, 100%.
All right. Well, we're rooting for you.
Great.
Let's see you have a great season this year.
I hope so.
Yeah, and
All right.
it's
Enjoy.
it's similar to when we had Luciano on. We're very fortunate to have clinicians from all over the world, but sometimes when we have some of our own, the best ones are the feedback is that they're very authentic and it's fantastic. So we can't thank you enough. Lots of comments coming in. Lots of thanks. So again, on behalf of NorCal, huge thank you, Mikey. We have recorded this, so I know I want to go back and watch it and take some notes and actually even take some clips and send to my coaches. I thought there was some really inspirational stuff in there, especially your analogy about creating players that, you know, don't even know you're kind of coaching them, or that whole process. I thought that was super inspiring and a great message. So on behalf of NorCal, I'll give Benjamin the final words, but thank you so much, Mikey, for being flexible, for getting back to us and taking the time and energy. So huge thank you from everyone in NorCal.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Good luck this season. We'll be rooting for you.
Appreciate it. Adios.
All right. See ya.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes.
Mikey, yeah. And then Sunday we have coach education, Spanish speaking, goalkeeping. Roberto Naves, how do you pronounce it, Benjamin? He's gone, he's left me. All the information's on the website. And then on Monday, we have Hadjuk split with Andrew Fistonic. So thanks again, everyone.